The English Bill of Rights. In the 1600s, many English male landowners had the right to vote, but most of the common people of England did not own land and could still not vote. Poor men could not vote. Women could not vote. Then in 1689, the people of England and the wealthy landowners forced the King and the Queen to sign a document called the English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights gave several important rights to most English landowners. Those rights would later become part of the United States Bill of Rights. Those rights are listed in a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about the most important right that was gained in the English Bill of Rights. The most important right that was gained was freedom of speech. The English Bill of Rights granted the right of freedom of speech only to members of the Parliament, but before that, nobody had ever had the right of freedom of speech. That right was first won in 1689. The right of freedom of speech later became part of the First Amendment of the U.S. Bill of Rights. Several of their rights originally won in the English Bill of Rights were included in the United States Bill of Rights. Here's a look at some of the other parts of it. Okay, restart. The English Bill of Rights. In the 1600s, many English male landowners had the right to vote, but most of the common people of England did not own land and still could not vote. Poor men could not vote, and women could not vote. Then, in 1689, the people of England and the wealthy landowners forced the King and Queen to sign a document called the English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights gave several important rights to most English landowners. Those rights would later become part of the United States Bill of Rights. The rights were the right to keep and bear arms, the right to petition the government, protection from cruel and unusual punishments and from excessive bail, freedom of speech, the right to trial by jury. The English Bill of Rights granted the right of freedom of speech only to members of Parliament. Before that, nobody had ever had the right of freedom of speech. That right was first won in the English Bill of Rights in 1689. The right of freedom of speech later became part of the First Amendment of the U.S. Bill of Rights. Several of the rights originally won in the English Bill of Rights were included in the United States Bill of Rights. But the English Bill of Rights is best known as being the first bill to give people the right of freedom of speech. Limits of the English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights did not give rights to all people in England. Only Englishmen who owned land were given rights. Poor men and all women did not yet have those rights. By accepting the Magna Carta and the English Bill of Rights, the English King and Queen agreed that people living in their country had important rights that could not be taken away. More importantly, the people realized that the King and Queen could not take these rights away. The first English colonists had those rights, and eventually those rights became part of the U.S. Bill of Rights. Here's a look of the timeline showing people's rights progress. You see in 1215, the Magna Carta gave wealthy landowners the right for trial by jury and representation for taxes. Then, 474 years later, the English Bill of Rights gave people the freedom of speech. The trial by jury was already given, but they had now the right to petition the government to bear arms and to not be given excessive punishment. They weren't allowed to be punished more than what their crime suggested. Let's take a look at how the English Bill of Rights was included as part of the U.S. Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights had the right to keep and bear arms, the right to petition the government, protection from cruel and unusual punishments and from excessive bails, freedom of speech, and the right to trial by jury. Here's a picture of the amendments in the United States Bill of Rights. Let's see if we can find the connections. The right to keep and bear arms is Amendment number 2. The right to petition the government is here in Amendment 1, the right to petition. Protection from cruel and unusual punishment and from excessive bail is here in Amendment 8. Freedom of speech is found in the First Amendment, and the right to trial by jury is in number 6 and Amendment number 7. So there are connections from the English Bill of Rights and the United States Amendment, which happened more than 100 years later. Additional rights that the English colonists won in America. In 1707, just a few years after the English Bill of Rights was signed, England became Great Britain. For the rest of the chapter, the names Britain and British will be used instead of England and English. More men get the right to vote. The right to vote was based upon owning land in both Britain and the colonies, but the average man in Britain could not afford to own land, so he could not vote. Because land was so much cheaper in the colonies, the average man was able to own land. Thus, the average man in the colonies was able to vote. With more men eligible to vote, the colonists actually had a more representative government than Britain did. The right to freedom of religion. The right of religious freedom was very important to many colonists who lived in America. Many early colonists moved to America to obtain freedom of religion. In Chapter 3, you read about the Pilgrims and the Puritans, 2 groups who moved to America to escape religious persecution. Also, you read about groups, such as the followers of Roger Williams and the Quakers, that established colonies based on the principles of religious tolerance. In those colonies, people could belong to any religious group they chose. Many people were attracted to America because of the religious freedom the colonies offered. The right of religious freedom is one of the 5 freedoms guaranteed in the First Amendment. A new right is one in the colonies: freedom of the press. Literacy developed in the 13 colonies. Because the first colonists thought the religion was important, stop there.